Itachi vs Obito is a hotly debated topic that's been around since the dark ages of the Naruto community, and I honestly believe that you can gauge exactly how well someone knows the series based on how well they argue this matchup. I do think Itachi wins this one, and for full transparency, I also believe he's the strongest member of the Akatsuki. Hopefully that doesn't turn y'all off to the rest of the video. I am going to explain my reasoning to the best of my ability while also being as unbiased as possible. When we compare Itachi and Obito, the only two things that really matter is how fast they are and whether or not their hacks abilities will work on their opponent. We don't really need to talk about their physical strength since neither of them are bodybuilders like the Raikage, and neither of them are capable of shooting off big explosions like Bijou. Now, I'm sure the majority of you are familiar with statements like these, where Obito says something along the lines of he needed Itachi to get out of the way before he could activate his Eye of the Moon plan, or from the novels where Itachi is confident that he would be able to kill Obito. And whether or not you think Obito was actually scared of Itachi in these instances, he was definitely threatened by him in some way, shape, or form. From here, we can just use some very basic deductive reasoning to conclude on this speed point. If Obito was significantly faster than Itachi to the point where he would blitz Itachi before he can react or something, Obito would have no basis for actually considering Itachi to be a threat, which is contradicted by what we see in the manga. Therefore, Obito cannot be significantly faster than Itachi. Obviously, this should imply some level of speed relativity between these two characters. I could actually make the argument that Itachi is much faster based off feats and other things we see in the manga, but for the sake of simplicity, we're just going to be operating under the aforementioned conclusion that these two are relative. Now, I'm sure you guys have been wondering up until this point, how does Itachi touch Obito? How is he actually going to inflict damage upon him when Kamui is just constantly protecting him? And honestly, I believe Amaterasu is all Itachi really needs to hard counter Kamui's phasing properties, but why do I think this? It actually all comes down to how you think Obito survived Amaterasu the first time he was hit by it in chapter 397. When Sasuke's left eye spawned the Amaterasu onto Obito's left shoulder, Obito seemed to be unable to phase through it, at least initially. Now, you could make the argument that Obito was caught off guard here since he wasn't expecting Amaterasu to come out of Sasuke's eye, but the thing is, Kamui is stated to be a passive ability that unconsciously protects its user no matter what, so that doesn't seem quite right to me. After he walks away from the Amaterasu unscathed, Obito thinks to himself, thankfully Itachi didn't know everything about me or else I would be dead. So it seems to me like Obito is implying that he has an ace up his sleeve, a hidden ability that allowed him to survive the Amaterasu that Itachi never knew he had. But that begs the question, what does Itachi actually know about Obito and his abilities? Now, this may come as a surprise to a lot of you, but Itachi actually knows quite a bit about Kamui. He has encountered Obito multiple times throughout his life when he's seen him use this ability. When Itachi was still a genin, Obito attacked his entire squad while they were out on a mission, and Itachi actually watches Obito phase through their abilities with Kamui during this fight. Several years later, Itachi catches Obito teleporting in and out of Konoha while he's performing his routine surveillance duties. Itachi describes it as all of the space in the surrounding area being warped and focused into one point, the hole in the man's mask. On top of this, right before the Uchiha massacre, Obito just kind of tells Itachi how Kamui works. He even mentions that it's a space-time ninjutsu. These three examples that I mentioned were before Itachi even joined the Akatsuki, before he really considered Obito to be a major threat. About 10 years had passed since the events of the Uchiha massacre and Itachi's death at the hands of Sasuke when he implanted the Amaterasu into his left eye. I believe that is more than enough time for Itachi to be able to figure out how to counter Kamui, especially when he already knows so much and other characters like Minato, Fu, and Torne all figured it out in a significantly shorter amount of time. My point being is that Obito cannot be referring to Kamui when he talks about hidden abilities Itachi doesn't know about, because we've already established that Itachi knows a lot about Kamui, including its phasing properties. The only ability that Obito has that would actually allow him to survive the Amaterasu that Itachi doesn't know he has access to would just be the Izanagi. Obito using Izanagi to survive the Amaterasu is actually more consistent than him using Kamui, because we see that Obito's clothes are perfectly fine after he emerges from the Amaterasu unscathed. And of course, the burn marks disappearing would only be possible through Izanagi. We know that he didn't begin phasing through it, at least initially, from what we see on screen, so there would have had to have been burn marks on him whether or not he phased through it, or if he had like sucked it into the Kamui dimension. I would honestly go so far as to say that Obito is incapable of phasing through Amaterasu entirely, at least when it spawns on him directly. My reason for believing this is that the Amaterasu is stated to converge on a single point within its user's vision, and after all of the chakra meets at that single focused point, it bursts into flames. Basically, the Amaterasu was already touching Obito before it even ignited, because it would have had to have converged on the single point on his body that Sasuke was looking at. But wait, wouldn't this mean that Obito is incapable of phasing through things that are already touching him? Yes. In chapter 503, after Minato slammed the Rasengan into Obito's back and placed a flying Raijin marker on him, we see that Minato teleports to Obito a second time while simultaneously stabbing him and placing a contract seal on his chest. Basically, in the moment that Minato spawned in from the flying Raijin technique, he was already touching Obito. There was quite literally no reason for Obito to allow himself to be hit or to make himself tangible in this moment, because he already got hit by Minato's Rasengan literally seconds prior to this. The Amaterasu seems to work very similar to the flying Raijin technique, it just spawns in on a point in the user's vision. So, since Obito is incapable of phasing through things that are already touching him, Itachi will just always win this fight with no more than 2 Amaterasu shots. Obviously, Obito has an extra eye to use for Izanagi, so that's why Itachi needs 2 Amaterasu shots to kill him. The only other counter that Obito has for Amaterasu would be to try to pull it into the Kamui dimension, but to do this he has to make himself tangible, and during this period of time Itachi can try to take advantage of this by stabbing him with the Totsuka blade while he's materialized. And obviously Obito shouldn't be fast enough to dodge it unless you think he scales to the Raikage while he's using body flicker, which you would never be able to prove. So now that we've established a very valid win con for Itachi, does Obito have anything that could realistically put him down? Well, I know a lot of people like to hype up Obito's genjutsu and compare it to the likes of Kodo Matsukami, but the sad fact of the matter is that Itachi's genjutsu is still stated to be better than Obito's on multiple occasions. But what about Obito's wood release that he obtained through Hashirama's cells? How strong is that? Well, we honestly don't really know, because the 2 times where he uses it, he's being amped by an external factor, either being Guru Guru Zetsu or the Renegon in the war, so we have no idea how good his wood release is at this point in time, because he never uses it. Obito's arsenal is incredibly limited. The only way where he would realistically beat Itachi is by trapping him in the Kamui dimension, and I don't even believe that would happen. Itachi has multiple things that would allow him to avoid getting sucked into the Kamui dimension, such as the Susanoo, which has a knockback property. We see this happen during the Sasuke vs Danzo fight. So if Obito gets close to Itachi and materializes to try to pull him into the Kamui dimension, Itachi just activates the Susanoo and pushes Obito back. Itachi also has access to exploding shadow clones that he could use to trick Obito into pulling in and then just blow them up while he's materialized. There's really just not much Obito can do here. Even if you think Itachi's stamina is so bad that he would barely be able to last a couple minutes with Obito, I've already established that only 2 Amaterasu shots is all it takes to defeat him. Honestly, we could go so far as to say that the Totsuka blade would just one-shot Obito, even if he tries to use Kamui. You could actually make an argument that the Totsuka blade doesn't exist within this plane of reality, since it's stated to have no true physical form, which leads to the implication that it doesn't have mass. This is pretty consistent because it is stated to be a divine spiritual blade or whatever, so you could say that since the Totsuka blade doesn't have a physical form or mass at all, Obito would just be unable to phase through it because it just doesn't exist as a tangible object. So far, I've established that both combatants are relative in speed, along with Itachi having a jutsu that can 2-shot Obito with better genjutsu and having multiple counters to Obito's singular win con. I don't believe there's a single scenario in which Itachi loses this one, but let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Thank you for your time.